Welcome, everybody. It's Donald Davidoff, CEO and co-founder of Real Estate Business Analytics, here with you for another episode of The People Behind the Performance, where I interview leaders in the industry, particularly in the technology space, people who are making a difference, really moving the ball forward for us in the industry. So today I have Leslie Hyman, co-founder and CEO at Circa. Leslie's been a customer advocate throughout her career as a founder of a $250 business with IG, as team, and developed an infrastructure to support customer acquisition, communications, and life. She's been insurance to the middle customer by packaging insurance in a box in partnership with Walmart. And at Swiss Re, Leslie was one of the founding members of a high-growth business, revolutionizing the underwriting process, offering consumers a better life insurance sales experience. Leslie has a BA from Williams College and an MBA from Columbia University. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks, Donald. Nice to be here.
So, my guess is a lot of people who are watching this are not necessarily familiar with Circa. Why don't you start? I'll give you a chance to give a little commercial, if you will, but more importantly, just explain what Circa is, what Circa does, so they have a sort of a perspective on where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So Circa is a payment platform for the multifamily business. And in a nutshell, Circa works both for the properties management companies and for the residents by developing an app that makes it easier to pay. In the end, we make it easier to collect rent or anything else on the behalf of the properties. We've designed the product with all of financial inclusion involved, including giving options to residents, the ability to split their payment into two, the ability to choose when and how they pay within certain parameters. And we make it accessible at their fingertips on the phone by turning payments into electronic and automated payments. It's what the residents want. They absolutely adore what we do. And it makes it that much easier for the properties to collect. It basically makes that role of assistant manager obsolete because we're doing the chasing rather than the assistant manager doing the chasing. And I will add a couple more things.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Unlike anyone else in this business, we have learned and perfected the ability to help residents catch up on past due, which means help properties bring past due accounts down to zero. And we do credit reporting of positive payments. So all of that is much better for the resident, and it turns out significantly better for the property too. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a wonderful thing. It's always great when something works for both sides. So let's start really generally. I mean, I always like to ask our guests, just as you think about the state of the industry today, what's really on your mind? Not just in terms of what Circa does, but just the overall sort of health and direction of this industry.
Oof, I love that you asked me that question because very much on my mind is a problem that very few people other than those in the public space really understand or are dealing with. We met last week with some ex-HUD leaders, and it turns out that the public space of lack of payment and past due accounts is so vast. I mean, my estimates are somewhere in the range of 55 to 60 billion in unpaid past due bills for rent. And that's a problem that is deep. It is, it certainly reflects some cultural problems and some economic problems in our country, but it's a problem that needs to be tackled. And so that's deep in my mind. It's something that's important in our country. We need to solve for it, and we need multiple solutions. Circa is, one part of that solution. It takes a lot more than Circa, and we're doing our part.
Yeah, so you and I have met before at a couple conferences, and obviously, you essentially come from outside the industry. So talk a little bit about how you got your start in multifamily. What drew you to it? How did you get into this particular vertical, obviously from the payments and insurance perspective?
So going back to my AIG days, I had two areas of expertise, both kind of operational, which is deep in my heart, one of my loves. One was building and managing payment systems, and the other was building and managing call centers across America. And that combination is what was the foundation of Circa. It was listening to customers, particularly in the what we call affordable space, who needed some flexibility and needed options. And when I was, fast forward to my life at Swiss Re, where we had many people not able to pay their premium, their insurance bills on the first of the month, just like rent is due, we figured out a way or looked for ways to be more flexible. When my co-founder Hyman and I, both from Swiss Re, delved deep into this problem and trying to come up with solutions, we immediately just said, we have to turn our attention to multifamily. Rent is the most important bill, and it's the one that hits on the first of the month. And if you can solve for rent, you've really made a difference in society. And so that's why we devoted ourselves to multifamily. And then I had
Now,
to,
when you think, oh, good.
then I had to learn the industry.
Keep going.
And I surrounded myself with people who know the industry. As you said, I've gone to conferences, I've listened, I've spoken. And then we brought in experts within our organization. So we had one of the heads of, or he was the head of capital markets at Marcus and Millichap as an advisor. We brought in a CRO who's 20 years in the industry. We now have a number of people in our organization who know the industry well. And so while I bring maybe new eyes and ears to the industry, we have quite a few within Circa, both employees and advisors.
What are your favorite industry publications or conferences or other resources to learn from? Kind of a primer for somebody, if somebody else out there is coming from outside, right? What advice would you give them on what to read, what to pay attention to so they could learn it more quickly?
That's such a great question. And I don't think I have the perfect answer. Within LinkedIn, I have followed many who are part of this industry. I'm probably, you're not going to hear me make plugs for particular industry magazines or conferences. And part of the reason is that you've got conferences that are very big, like the NAAs of the world. Then you've got conferences like one that we're at now, Blueprint, that are a little more focused. And I find that you actually need all of it. And then truthfully, what I learned most from, this is the crazy thing, it's those on-site managers. They are on the ground. They are talking to the residents. They know the residents' story. They know the residents' capacity to pay. They know what works in terms of messaging. And if there's any group I've learned the most from, it's the on-site managers.
Yeah, it's fun. I always told my revenue managers, I reminded them that we were just a revenue multiplier. And if the field was earning zero, then it didn't matter what we multiplied, right? It is those community managers and those leasing agents and the service tax. That's where the money's made in this industry, right? The rest of it doesn't exist if they're not doing their job well.
Right, but they can't really do their job well anymore. Turnover at 70%, that doesn't work. They need technology. They need support. They need to be paid. They need people who listen. They need to have people who care. And so the on-site managers love what we do too, because we take some of the heavy lifting off their shoulders.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge that Circa is facing right now, and how are you working to overcome that?
I would say the biggest challenge is property owners or managers' fear of technology. So fear of change. And look, I fully understand that. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, when we switched to Yardi, RealPage, AppFolio, any one of the big property management software systems, it took a year to 2 years to get that working. And so they had this fear that Circa
Mhm.
will be the same. It's a little hard for me or our sales team to say, really it might take 2 months. That's a hard message for them to swallow because they have no reason to believe it. But fear of technological change is sort of pervasive in this
Mhm.
industry. I get it. You're affecting people. You're affecting people paying their rent. There's nothing more important. So we take that seriously. We devote ourselves to the
Mhm.
institutions. We devote ourselves to the communications. But that's really the barrier to entry for us.
Mhm. So I'm curious, as you've and when did you start Circa again?
We launched in 2020, so kind of as the pandemic
Okay.
was starting.
Right
I
into the pandemic. Yeah, well, we closed our angel round December 31st, 2019. So
yeah,
3 months, less than 3 months later, we were
same.
right in the thick of COVID as well. So I feel the pain.
Well, I was walking mobile home parks with masks around me and still
Yeah.
getting invited into their homes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But think about it. I mean, a lot has happened in 3 years. What is something that 2023 Leslie knows that maybe 2020 Leslie didn't know, that if you could go back and teach her that, it would have made things even that much better for you, even just in 3 years. What's something you wish you knew then that you know now?
So I'll answer the what you're asking, what do I know now that changed? And I
Mhm.
will also answer what actually changed economically. So what I now
Mhm.
know, and it took some data to understand that, is that if you remove friction of payment from the resident, it really boosts NOI for the property. So
Mhm.
that was my hunch, but now I've done it and I know that in some of these
Mhm.
properties where we added Circa, we improved within month payment by over 17%. We didn't know
Mhm.
these numbers. Now I know them. So would that I could have had those bold statements at the beginning, but I couldn't. I needed the
Right.
data. And then
Mhm.
there's been a couple of tailwinds this year. I don't particularly love high interest rates, but it has created a bit of fear, and that has
Mhm.
driven properties to want Circa. And then the high
Mhm.
turnover rate of managers. I mean, my God, the property owners are actually scared that if a manager leaves, they can't fill that slot. So they now know they
Mhm.
have to do things differently. They have to add
Right.
technology. So that has also helped us in making sales.
Yeah. So talking about data is obviously near and dear to my heart. It's a good segue into kind of the next set of questions I've got. The term data driven decision making gets thrown around an awful lot these days. So I always like to ask our guests, like, what does data driven decision making mean to you?
Yeah, so we do a series of OKR methodology decision making. So we look at the beginning of the quarter, we look at what's our big objective, what are we using to measure whether we've succeeded or not succeeded, and then we measure
Mhm.
ourselves and make decisions off of those data points. So it is a company-wide process to come up with the OKRs. We review them
Mhm.
on sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly levels. And if there's an initiative we're thinking about that doesn't fit into those required OKRs, we don't do it.
Mhm.
So that's not
Yep.
your traditional, data-based decisions. That's more how to
Mhm.
organize the structure of our company and the people.
Mhm.
We do look at data as well, particularly what residents say. So that's really interesting data and very rich data. And then we
Yeah.
absolutely look at what they do, like what percentage of residents are splitting their payment. At what point do they make a decision to split their payment?
Mhm.
What percentage are using cash? What percentage are using ACH? What percentage are using credit cards? So those are the decision-making data points that we look at every day. But for the most
Mhm.
part, we're just adjusting our product, and we haven't needed much adjustment because we kind of nailed it in what we've done.
So as you look at those key results, some of the metrics you just described that you measure. Any surprises, anything where you've seen behavior different than maybe conventional wisdom would thought,
So,
or has it mostly reinforced conventional wisdom?
so there's one, and I'll tell a little bit of a difficult story. Um, for the most part, we work on affordable spaces, but we have a couple of Class
Mhm.
A properties. They behave very differently. So an example of the shift is in our affordable properties, it's probably 90 to 95% of the residents use the app, not the web. On the Class A, more residents, in fact, most of them are using the web, not the app. Now, it makes
Oh,
sense.
interesting.
So if you've got a $2,500 to $33,000 average rent, those individuals sit down at a desk when they're paying their bills. They've got their
Yeah.
laptop open. They don't need to live, their office is not on their phone. So that's one thing. They also
Mhm.
are more accustomed to automated payments. And so it was really incumbent on us on these Class A properties to make sure they turn off any other automated payments before they turn on the Circa automated payment. So that was a little bit of a learning for us.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'd love to collect double rent if we could get away with it, but I'm pretty sure the
Yeah, no,
operator had to give it back, right? So when you think, I mean, coming from the insurance industry, I mean, that's kind of the ultimate analytical business, right? I mean, actuarial math, created in the life insurance business. Um, so, I suspect that there's some things that just come second nature to you that, there are people in our industry that are still just starting on their data journey. So, when you look back, not just in the last 3 years, but even through your whole career, what advice would you give to a COO or a CEO or head of asset management that's really just starting their data journey, moving away from,
oh boy.
intuition and a bunch of Excel reports into a true, data experience? Where's a good place to start?
There are so many points. I'll give just a few highlights. Um,
Mhm.
Heard a very senior manager of a very large property talk about collecting data as their residents come into the manager's office, knowing
Mhm.
what the residents were coming into the office to ask for. Great, love it. But my question to that senior manager is, what about the residents who didn't come in? How are you tackling that piece of data that you don't have?
Yeah.
So there's some really interesting learnings. When you've done large scale data, which I have done, you know what to look
Mhm.
for that's apparent and that's not apparent. I would
Yeah.
say clearly centralization is a big word these days. We have done centralization because it's natural to us. I've run large call centers. Our new chief of staff, who is also a customer success expert, she's run large call centers. My co-founder Hyman is a data analyst at heart. That's what he does, aside from being a CTO. Um, Interestingly, call centers are the future. We just call it centralization in this industry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
interestingly, I understand in this industry that large companies don't start their own call center until they've hit 50,000 units. Well, we are doing it for, properties with 50 units. And so we've
Mhm.
brought centralization and the highest quality centralization to
Mhm.
small, medium, and large properties.
Got it. I'm intrigued. I don't know if this might be stretching the metaphor a bit or the story a bit, but I'm intrigued at that comment you made right at the beginning of the answer around, it's great that you're collecting data on the people who are coming to your office. What about the ones who don't? I remember the old story from World War II about, bombers coming back and they evaluated where all the holes were. And, they saw patterns where all the holes were. And people thought initially, well, that's where we need to shore things up. And the actual answer was no, no, no. You need to shore up armor where there weren't holes, right? Because the
Exactly.
planes that came back with those holes made it back there. It's the ones that got shot where those didn't get shot that clearly went down. So it may be a bit of a stretch, but as you were saying that, like that old story hit my head.
Love.
And, I will bet that most managers, whether it's, I mean, even if it's not organized or disciplined, right? If it's just anecdotal, they're living off of what they hear from the people who talk to them. And that's by definition a skewed data source. So how do you go fill in the blanks and find out, like, wait a moment, what happened to those planes that didn't return? Because it's those people who aren't talking to you that may hold, more of a key to what you need to learn.
Right. And that was the premise of what we built. So we are doing full on communications, notifications that rent is coming up, explanation by email, text, phone when a payment doesn't go through. All of that communication was to get ahead of the people who are not communicating. But what happens today is if a resident isn't paying on time, they hide. And now this is why I say talk to the manager or the assistant manager. It's their role to find that resident, which is a very unpleasant and time-consuming process. Those people, those residents tend to find us because we're a third party. We have a little bit more of an empathetic ear. We're willing to hear their story, and then we're very crisp and clear about their next step and their options. But they're willing to talk to us because we're not the manager. We're not the bad guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Slightly different subject. I mean, obviously your platform depends on data coming from the PMS. How do you ensure data consistency? What are maybe some lessons on data governance that that others could learn from your 3-year journey so far?
Yeah, wonderful question. So I will say that the integration process is, as you well know, harder than anyone expects at the beginning. And for us, it's particularly interesting. Pulling data via API or file transfer, not difficult at all. Pushing data should be easy, but we are square peg into round hole because we are pushing split payments into a system that does not allow for split payments. So we had to develop systems that are effectively more hands, as if we were the on-site managers entering into Yardi, RealPage, AppFolio. So the fact that AppFolio, for instance, doesn't do APIs is not really a problem for us. We solved it anyway because we had to solve it for all of them. So it's something that we became expert at. I don't know about governance or accuracy. Yes, we certainly have situations where the data is not current or accurate. We have ways of asking the relevant questions because now we've seen it enough times to make sure that we add in the information. I mean, the bottom line is, if you're still working with one of the property management software systems, you have to do things manually. There's no other answer. So companies that say, I can do API only, it's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see as the biggest data threat out there in the industry? What's the biggest thing getting in our way?
I mean, I personally, and you've heard me say this, I think there should be a division of tasks that our systems currently have. So those large property management software systems, they're not going anywhere fast. They're going to be around for a long time. But they, 20 years ago, put together a whole pile of capabilities into one system. And that's why, properties complain about them. They can't do any one of those tasks top level because they're trying to do all of them. So I'm not complaining about the property management software systems. I know why they were built. I understand it. They play a really important role. But I think there is expertise in each of those capabilities that could be a game changer.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Well, I think that's excuse me, a great place to switch just into our last section of people behind the performance. As those who've watched this a number of times know, we kind of like to, after doing all this heavy lifting, end our interviews with a fun little kind of rapid fire James Lipton style Q&A for those who remember inside the Actors Studio. We've narrowed it down to just 7 questions. There's only one rule, and that rule is don't think too hard. So
Yeah.
you ready, Leslie?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
turn the brain off.
What book has influenced you the most?
Oh, so many. I mean, in this industry, eviction. I mean, those that and financial diaries, both of those really are near and dear to my heart. Help us understand the plight of the resident and of the manager.
Yep. What is your favorite time of day?
Oh, I'm such a morning person. Sunrise.
What's your favorite app?
Favorite app? No, the one that is not favorite but constantly used is Slack. That's how we work.
Yep.
We're a distributed company and we live on it.
That has come up before. What's your biggest pet peeve?
um, I really I care about listening and I care about hearing people. And so when people judge without hearing, that's very hard on me. I think it's really important not to judge and to take people for who they are.
What's your spirit animal?
Oh, dogs. Love, love, love dogs.
Yeah, that's my younger daughter. Second to last question. If you had to pick one food to eat forever, what would you eat?
Oh goodness. Probably corn, which is really funny in this country. I don't believe in what
Uh,
we've done about corn, but I love it.
okay. And last, what's your go-to for having a good laugh?
Oh, my husband.
There you go. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today, Leslie. Where can everyone find out a little more about you and about Circa online?
Yeah, you can go to wearecirca.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for being with us, and to everybody else, we'll look forward to joining you again with our next episode of People Behind the Performance.
Thank you.